From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
I can't breathe! I can't breathe! I can't breathe! Black Lives Matter!
No justice!
No peace!
No racist!
Police!
We don't get it!
Shut it down!
We don't get it!
Shut it down!
I can't breathe, shut it down. Thousands of protesters from New York to Chicago to San Francisco took to the streets again to protest police killings following a New York grand jury's decision not to indict the officer who put Eric Garner in a lethal chokehold. As New York Mayor Bill de Blasio orders the retraining of the city's police force, we'll speak to former New York police detective Graham Weatherspoon.
We have to realize that when a police officer gets to the point where he's crossing from the actions of a police officer to the actions of a criminal, something has to be done.
Just as the grand jury decision in the Garner case was announced in Staten Island, a funeral was wrapping up in Cleveland for Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old African-American boy who was shot dead by police while holding a toy gun at a park. We'll go to Cleveland, where the Justice Department just wrapped up a probe of the city police force.
We have determined that there is reasonable cause to believe that the Cleveland Division of Public Police engages in a pattern and practice of using excessive force.
We'll speak with Ohio State Senator Nina Turner. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Thousands of protesters have swarmed the streets of New York City for a second night to protest the grand jury's decision not to indict the white police officer who killed Eric Garner. Garner, an African-American father of 6, died after police placed him in a banned chokehold, piled on top of him, pinned him to the ground while he pleaded with them, saying at least 11 times, "I can't breathe." That phrase has become the rallying cry of protesters who shut down traffic on the Manhattan and Brooklyn bridges, the West Side Highway, and the Holland Tunnel. Police said they arrested more than 200 people, many near Times Square. The decision came on the heels of another grand jury's decision in Ferguson, Missouri, not to indict the white police officer who killed the African-American teenager Michael Brown. The Reverend Al Sharpton has called for a march on Washington next Saturday to demand action from the federal government.
We need to first centralize and be focused that the federal government must do in the 21st century what it did in the mid-20th century. Federal intervention had to come into the South to protect people's civil rights and voting rights. Federal intervention must come now and protect people from state grand juries that keep exonerating any seeking of redress on police matters. And that's what the 13th is about.
Amidst the nationwide uproar over the Eric Garner decision, another case has come to light in Phoenix, Arizona, where a white police officer killed an unarmed black man. Phoenix police say the officer, who has not been named, feared that Remain Brisbane had a gun because he felt something in his pocket, which turned out to be a pill bottle. The police say they suspected Brisbane of involvement in a drug deal and shot him after he fled into his apartment. But protesters say Brisbane was delivering dinner to his children. He's the father of 4. Marcy Cratter is an attorney for Brisbane's family.
We need to take a deeper dive into why police officers are feeling compelled to shoot and kill as opposed to apprehend and detain, arrest, and jail.
A Justice Department investigation has found a pattern of unreasonable and unnecessary force by police officers in Cleveland, Ohio. The report details a history of abuse across hundreds of cases, characterizing police behavior as chaotic and dangerous. In some cases, Cleveland police opened fire on people who were running away and posed no threat. In one case, the Justice Department said a Cleveland police officer punched a handcuffed 13-year-old boy in the face repeatedly. In another, police used a taser on a man who was strapped to a gurney and experiencing seizures because he was making verbal threats. The investigation was launched last year, but comes on the heels of the fatal police shooting of 12-year-old African-American Tamir Rice, who was killed while holding a toy gun in a park. will go to Ohio to speak with Democratic Ohio State Senator Nina Turner about the case later in the broadcast. Fast food and other low-wage workers have walked off the job in nearly 200 cities across the country. The wave of actions Thursday may be the largest in the history of the fast food industry. The workers were joined by other low-wage employees across other industries, including healthcare aides and airline employees. Federal contractors who work in sites like the Capitol and the Pentagon were also expected to take part in the strike for a $15 an hour wage and a union. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry's pledge to continue U.S. investment in Afghanistan. Speaking in London, Kerry praised the government of Afghan President Ashraf Ghani.
My friends, we have a government in Kabul that merits our confidence and our support. And never before has the prospect of a more fully independent and sustainable Afghanistan been more clear than it is at this moment as we assemble here in London. The Afghan people should be very proud of this progress. And as they continue to move forward, they can be confident of the support of the international community.
Kerry's remarks come as a new report in Rolling Stone reveals how Afghanistan has descended into a narco state, producing 90% of the world's opium supply this year. A gun battle between authorities and Islamist militants has gripped the capital of Chechnya. At least 20 people were killed in Grozny after militants attacked police. The assailants are believed to be rebels who want independence from Russia. The European Union's announced an agreement that would allow member states to ban cultivation of genetically modified crops. The legislation would let the 28 EU countries ban the crops even if European Union regulators approve them. Environmentalists who are seeking to curb GMOs over potential health and ecological harms have voiced concern the measure could leave countries that ban GMOs vulnerable to legal retaliation from multinationals like Monsanto. The latest disclosures from NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden have revealed the National Security Agency has spied on communications among employees of major cell phone network operators in order to exploit vulnerabilities in phone networks. According to The Intercept, documents from Snowden reveal a covert operation called Aurora Gold, which involved monitoring more than 1,200 email accounts associated with the cell firms. In one case, just before the U.S. intervention in Libya, the NSA helped a U.S. military intelligence unit hack into Libya's cell phone networks using information obtained by spying on company employees. Israel's experienced one of its worst environmental disasters after a ruptured oil pipeline sent millions of gallons of crude gushing into a key nature preserve. The spill heavily damaged the Evrona Reserve near the Jordanian border. More than 80 people in Jordan were hospitalized with breathing problems. In Nigeria, the Niger Delta has suffered one of its worst oil spills in years after nearly 4,000 barrels of crude poured from a Shell pipeline. Shell's blame the spill on oil thieves. Environmentalists say the devastation stretches for miles with dead fish and crabs washing up on the shoreline. Germany's unveiled a plan to reduce carbon emissions that are warming the planet. The plan aims to help Germany meet a goal of reducing emissions by 40% by the year 2020. But environmentalists say the proposed steps don't go far enough to reduce the country's use of coal-fired power plants. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon touted commitments by Germany and other countries before traveling to participate in the UN Climate Summit in Lima, Peru next week.
We are determined to sustain the momentum generated by the recent important announcements by the United States, China, European Union, and yesterday Germany on emission reductions. Next year is an opportunity to take big steps, transformative steps in the right direction. We must do all it takes to provide hope for people and the planet.
Democracy Now! Is headed to Lima, Peru, where we'll broadcast all next week from the UN Climate Summit. State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki has been caught on a hot mic criticizing the U.S. talking points on an Egyptian court's decision to drop all charges against ousted President Hosni Mubarak. Psaki spoke at a news conference after Mubarak was cleared of ordering the killings of hundreds of protesters during the uprising against his regime in 2011.
Well, generally, we continue to believe that upholding impartial standards of accountability will advance the political consensus on which Egypt's long-term stability and economic growth depends. But beyond that, I would refer you to the Egyptian government for any further comment. At the end of the news conference, a mic captured Psaki telling a reporter that Egypt line is ridiculous. Psaki later said in an email to ABC News, quote, "It's just the latest scientific evidence of global warming. Now we have to worry about hot mics." But as Secretary Kerry reminded me, I'm in good company in this administration. The Navy has revoked the honorary title it gave to comedian Bill Cosby in the latest fallout from reports he drugged and sexually assaulted women for decades. More than 20 women have accused Cosby of assaulting them. The Navy, which awarded Cosby the title of Chief Petty Officer in 2011 after some of the victims had already come forward, said in a statement Cosby's actions were, quote, "very serious and in conflict with the Navy's core values." And Herman Badillo, a trailblazing politician who became the first Puerto Rican-born member of Congress, has died at the age of 85. Badillo served as a powerful voice in New York City politics for decades. He started out as a civil rights attorney and went on to hold a range of city posts and serve 4 terms in Congress. Throughout his career, he championed the rights of Latinos and the poor. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world.
In the midst of all that's happening, Juan, you did your column on Herman Badillo.
Yes, on Wednesday, because Badillo died actually on Wednesday morning, and in all of the press attention, obviously, to the Eric Garner case, that whole story sort of like had to take a second place to all the big news occurring. But Herman Badillo was, for 50 years, the most influential figure of the Latino community in New York City. He had an amazing career all that time. And while he started out really as a very important liberal civil rights advocate in his later years, he turned somewhat more conservative in his views, but nonetheless was always considered the key figure in Latino politics in New York City. And I'd known him for 40 years, 40 of his 50 years in public life, and often sought counsel and debated him on a number of issues, and always respected the enormous energy and passion he brought to fighting for equality and for all people in New York City.
And you'll be speaking at his funeral on Sunday?
Yes, on Sunday. But Rudy Giuliani, the former mayor who he was close to, will also be there, and many of the political leaders of New York City of the past half century will be attending.
Well, we'll link to your column in the New York Daily News. This is Democracy Now! As we turn to the top story of the day.
Well, we turn now to the ongoing protests over the police killing of Eric Garner in New York.
No justice!
No peace!
No racist!
Police! Black Lives Matter!
Wrong time to do shit, huh?
This is what democracy looks like!
Show me what democracy looks like!
This is what democracy looks like! Now!
If we don't get it,
shut it down!
we don't get it!
Shut it down! I can't breathe! I can't breathe! I can't breathe!
For a second night, thousands of protesters swarmed the streets of New York to protest a grand jury's decision not to indict the white police officer who killed Eric Garner, an African-American father of 6, after placing him in a banned chokehold. Garner's last words were, "I can't breathe." Protesters chanted those words as they blocked traffic, shutting down the Manhattan and Brooklyn bridges, the West Side Highway, and the Holland Tunnel. The police reported making more than 200 arrests, including many near Times Square.
We look at the cops. This is supposed to be a peaceful protest. Bill de Blasio said it himself. We could be out here and do what we want as long as we're not doing any trouble. And look what's going on. They're pushing people. They're hitting people, pushing them out the way, throwing them on the floor, arresting them for no apparent reason at all.
Protesters held symbolic die-ins across Manhattan and Brooklyn. Family members of loved ones killed by NYPD led one of the marches across the Brooklyn Bridge, then held a 7-minute die-in that marked the time the medics left Garner untreated as he lay on the ground unresponsive. Another die-in lasted 11 minutes, one for each time Garner was heard telling officers, quote, "I can't breathe," in a video recording of the fatal incident. Outside the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, protesters carried mock coffins while singing protest songs.
I still hear my brother saying, I can't breathe. Now I'm in the struggle saying, I can't leave. Calling out the violence of these racist police.
Similar protests were held across the country. In Washington, D.C., hundreds staged a die-in near the Washington Monument.
We're peacefully protesting and that our lives matter and everyone should care because police brutality is not okay against black people, against anybody.
In Boston, protesters shut down the Massachusetts Turnpike and Interstate 93, as well as part of the city's subway system. In Chicago, demonstrators shouted, "Hands up, don't shoot," while blocking Lakeshore Drive along Lake Michigan. In San Francisco, marchers shut down Market Street. Hundreds also marched in Oakland. On Thursday, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio announced a major retraining of some 22,000 patrol officers and supervisors.
People need to know that black lives and brown lives matter as much as white lives. It's what we still have to aspire to. I said it yesterday, I believe it. This is not just a problem in New York City. It is an American problem, an American challenge. It's an issue that goes back to the founding of this republic that we still haven't resolved. Our generation has to resolve it. The leaders you see around me, we are all responsible now. The weight of history can't be our excuse. And I've said that I feel these issues very, very personally.
The case against New York police officer Daniel Pantaleo, who placed Eric Garner in a chokehold, is far from over. Garner's family is expected to file a civil wrongful death lawsuit. The NYPD has launched an investigation, and other officers at the scene are reportedly scheduled to be interviewed today. New reports show Pantaleo was the subject of 2 civil rights lawsuits in 2013 over false arrests and abuse. In one incident, he ordered 2 black men to strip naked on the street for a search. The charges against the men were dismissed. Well, today we'll be joined by 3 guests here in New York, and we'll also be going to Ohio. Harry Siegel is with us, a columnist and editorial writer for the New York Daily News. His latest piece headlined "The Lonesome Death of Eric Garner." When men are treated like pieces of meat by cops and medics, trust erodes. Graham Weatherspoon is with us, retired detective with the New York City Police Department, and Michael Denzel Smith, contributing writer for The Nation and Nobler Fellow at the Nation Institute. His latest piece, "The System That Failed Eric Garner and Michael Brown Cannot Be Reformed." He was at last night's protests, as so many were. But we want to start with Harry Siegel because of a part of the video that has not been seen as much. We've all seen over and over again the horror of Eric Garner being taken down in that chokehold, banned by the police department, and piled on by all of these officers in Staten Island on the sidewalk. But as you write about in your New York Daily News column on Wednesday, it's the second Eric Garner video that made me cry. Not the one where Officer Daniel Pantaleo chokes Garner for 15 seconds before smashing his head into the sidewalk for 10 seconds as other cops held down and cuffed Garner, ignoring the pleas he issued with the last air in his lungs, "I can't breathe." It's the video shot minutes later as Garner lies dying among men and women in uniforms, men and women who seem not to give half a damn, that broke me down. Harry Siegel's words. He goes on to describe the second video that shows Garner laying unresponsive on the sidewalk after he was put in a chokehold as police and medics do nothing to help him. Eventually, they lift his body onto a stretcher. Then he describes this scene in the video where onlookers question the officers. Listen closely.
Why nobody do the CPR?
No, I did nothing.
He's breathing. He's breathing? Yeah.
In this second part of the video, and it goes on to show the EMT, the emergency workers, in the video we're showing, the camera turns to Officer Pantaleo, who's in the distance. He notices the video is being taken on his cell phone and shows him waving at the person filming. Harry, talk about this part of the video, the entire scene, including the emergency workers coming.
This man is on the ground. He's unresponsive. He's on his stomach, which is not procedure. When someone's already been arrested, he's cuffed, and that's a way that you can stop someone from being able to breathe, especially a larger guy. There are officers there. Two of them are holding him, but they're more or less ignoring him. An EMT finally shows up. She sees he has a pulse. She says, and the cops say, sir, we're here to help. Can you respond to the EMT, to the unconscious guy on the ground? As you heard, people who are being held in stores, just ordinary Staten Island citizens, are saying he can't breathe. It's not that hard to figure out. He's entirely ignored. Eventually, the two EMTs come back, two medics come back, and a bunch of cops lift Garner, who's a large man, and plop him onto a gurney.
What was the comment of the cop as they're going to pick him up? Something like, it'll take 6 men?
It's 5, I believe, counting when they do finally pick him up, and and then drop him from maybe 6 inches up. One of his legs rolls off. One of the cops is holding the back of his shirt, his T-shirt. Stomach's out, you know. It looks like he's about to fall off. The contempt for just this living, breathing human is palpable.
And there's no attempt at any point for someone by someone to resuscitate him, not even the EMT.
Or to clear his airways or any other part of this. And we're reporting in the news today, in a significant case that's gotten a little less attention at this point, the Akai Gurley and the Pink House shootings, that the officer who it looks like accidentally shot him, that after they did that, the reason there's this long delay is that they went and called their union rep before they called 911.
Wait, can you got to tell this more, because all the attention is on Eric Garner. Akai Gurley hasn't gotten as much attention, but why don't you explain what happened in the midst of all of this, right before actually the Ferguson verdict or decision of the grand jury came down. Explain what happened in New York.
Two rookie police officers, although older, are doing a vertical patrol, which is when you're in a public housing building and you go up to the roofs to make sure nothing bad is happening there, and you check the stairwells. These are considered dangerous assignments. They often make cops nervous. It's not great to have two rookies doing this. They go off the roof and into a stairwell. It's dark, which it shouldn't be. The light is off. The floor below is off. One of them takes out his gun, which is a matter of officer discretion by New York policy, which is its own very serious problem. They open the door. A floor down, a young man with his, I believe his girlfriend, opens the door, a 28-year-old man. Somehow the officer's gun goes off, and he ends up dead. He doesn't realize he's shot right away. He runs down the stairs, Akai Gurley. The police officers run back upstairs. They've shot. Maybe they're scared now of what they've done. Maybe they don't understand quite what's happening, and there's an echo. But they don't go and try to resuscitate this man or find out what happened. And we're finding out today, the news is reporting that the first thing they do is call their union reps, and help finally arrives, and only because one of the neighbors calls 911 after these two officers, it doesn't appear with any ill intent. Just the sort of sloppiness where you have your gun out and you shoot and you think you might have hit someone, and your first concern is, oh no, what have I done to my life? Run upstairs and call their union, not 911. Don't try to help the man, and that is.
And there were also now indications that they weren't even supposed to be on a vertical patrol, that
Yes.
they had been told not to be on a vertical patrol as well.
Yes, which would, I can't even wrap my mind around that.
And this also goes to public housing, that the elevator wasn't working, which is why Akai went into the stairwell to walk down
Yes.
with his girlfriend, also the father of a 2-year-old. and the fact that the cops went into this dark stairwell and ended up shooting the gun.
And in night shift buildings, at 4:30, the staff pretty much goes. So if there's a light out and they haven't dealt with it at that point, and bear in mind, people work, they come home maybe at 6. They're in buildings where the elevators don't always work, and suddenly just going up or down is a tremendous danger. And the police officers are there, especially younger ones. They're scared, and they're scared of ordinary people who are using the stairs. And it's a recipe for this sort of a disaster to happen. And unfortunately, it just has. And this man who'd done nothing of any sort wrong, just opened the door, is dead. But to me, as with Gardner, the contempt afterward, there's this moment of violence, and then someone is hurt, and you have officers who are not responding like another human being has been hurt is what's heartbreaking.
And of course, the line that connects all of these, if you go to the Michael Brown case, after Michael Brown is shot, he is left for hours and hours on the street right there in front of not only his relatives and all of his neighbors, again, in some disregard for the basic humanity of a person. Yeah.
And in the case of Garner, the police are shouting at the onlookers. They're saying, give him space, give him space. And one of the women who's standing next to Ramsey Orchard, the one who filmed the cell phone clearly because her voice is right next to her, she's saying, oh, now you're saying give him space when you're the ones who took him down. Where are the EMTs? Where's the emergency workers? She was shouting.
That's right. And everything that they're saying is
they were
right
saying,
and
why
reasonable.
don't you give him CPR? That's what she was saying.
Yes. And they're saying, back up, back up. They're controlling the perimeter. He needs air. But they're not doing anything to help this man breathe or determine if he needs that help. They're just letting him lie there. And he doesn't die on the ground. They put him in an ambulance, and he has a heart attack there and then dies. Like after this chokehold, after that whole part of things, there's a very decent chance that his life could have been saved if he'd just been thought of as a full human being.
We're going to talk about this right after break. Harry Siegel, columnist and editorial writer for the New York Daily News. Juan Gonzalez, co-host on Democracy Now!, also a columnist at the New York Daily News. And we come back, Michael Denzel Smith with The Nation, and Graham Weatherspoon, a retired detective with the New York Police Department. This is Democracy Now!, back in a minute.
He has been here too. Distant cousin from down the line, random people who ain't my kind. Holy Moses, I have been removed. Holy Moses, I have been deceived.
Holy Moses by Aretha Franklin here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. Our guests are Harry Shapiro from the New York Daily News, Harry Siegel from the New York Daily News, Michael Denzel Smith from The Nation, and Graham Weatherspoon, retired detective with the New York City Police Department. Juan?
Well, Graham, I'd like to ask you about the video we've just been talking about in the previous segment. You've looked at that carefully, the video of the last moments of Eric Garner's life.
Yes. I looked at it a number of months ago. As a matter of fact, a group of us met with the Inspector General of NYPD and the newly appointed Commissioner of the Department of Investigations back in the summer. In that video, as Eric Garner is laying on the gurney, you do not see his chest rising or falling. There is no apparent movement in his body whatsoever. He's a large guy, and if he were taking a breath or if he had difficulty breathing, it would be quite obvious. His body lays there motionless. The EMTs arrive. First of all, the police officers are to, number one, attempt to give some type of first aid to him. Allegedly, there's a pulse, they say, but you don't see this large man's body moving at all in the video. They made no attempt to open an airway. She just talks to him casually, and this is another problem because many of the EMTs and the police officers, they work together. Had not, there's a state law which requires medical personnel to report the abuse of a prisoner. It was done in the case of Abner Louima. It was a nurse that reported the physical violation of Abner Louima. And many times, the police...
Abner Louima is the Haitian immigrant who was sodomized by police.
Right.
And when he came to the hospital and was bleeding, it was the nurse.
It was the nurse that reported it. Many times, people wind up in the hospital, medical personnel who are required by law to report the abuse of a prisoner do not report it. So they, too, are complicitous in this whole system. It's not just the criminal justice system, it's the entire system. So the EMTs, the physicians, it runs a gamut. There's a plethora of incestuous relationships here where everybody is covering for everybody else. That shooting, I'll be at the funeral tonight for the young man, Gurney, but no police officer is trained to walk on patrol with a gun in his hand. That's as reckless as giving a drunk a gun and telling him to go down the street. You do not move around with a weapon in your hand. There's no there's no emergency condition. You do not walk with a gun. You do not run with a gun in your hand. For that simple reason, and they were never trained to do it, it is not a discretionary move on the officer's part. If you are afraid, stay home with mommy. This is not a job that you can just jump into. If you are not prepared to do it, and I've spoken with rookies in the past, I said, it is okay if you feel that you're afraid. If you're afraid, you need to seek out some other type of work. This is not a casual job because you're going to wind up hurting somebody or yourself. And here it is, it's called a tragedy. This is recklessness.
You talk about all the people who are responsible, but what about all of those cops? We now know about Daniel Pantaleo. Quite astounding that the head of the PBA, the Patrolmen's Benevolent Association, is talking about him as a model cop when, among other things, you've got the lawsuits and settlements from 2013. You've got the image of him with that chokehold. But the other officers, some were granted immunity. I don't know if they will be fired in this police investigation that begins today by the police commissioner.
It's acting in concert. You will find that, for instance, in Ferguson, they showed the video of Michael Brown going in and stealing some cigars. And he hands some to his friend, and his friend puts them back on the counter, and they leave the store. That went from a larceny to a robbery, technically. It was a robbery. Forcibly taking, the man tried to retrieve it, Brown pushed him, and the two went out the door. Now, the other fellow who was with Brown could be charged with acting in concert because he came with Michael Brown. The crime was committed. He didn't do anything to try and stop Michael from doing what he was doing, and he left with Michael. Here are police officers acting in concert in taking down a large man who was not in distress because of his weight or diabetes or anything. He only fell into distress when they jumped on him. At some point, one of the officers should say, hey, wait, hold it. Because now you're going from a lawful act to a criminal act. When a person is begging for air and you show a depraved indifference to human life, that is a crime. Representative King said recently that it's not a crime to choke. It is a felony crime to choke a person in the state of New York. He has a law degree, and he's speaking errantly. It is a felony crime to choke, cut off the airway, or the flow of blood to the brain and render an individual unconscious. It is a felony crime.
Michael Smith, I'd like to bring you into the discussion. You just wrote a piece saying that the system cannot be reformed. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, because what we're talking about here is the disposability of black life. We're dancing around it, but the reason that Eric Garner lay there and no one helped him is this is a large black man. The reason Michael Brown's body laid in the street for 4.5 hours is because this is a black man. The reason that the police show up on the scene and shoot Tamir Rice when he's holding a toy gun in Cleveland is because he's a black boy. Like, we're talking about the fact that, you have a racist and unjust system. You have racist and unjust laws. Your law enforcement then has no choice but to be racist and unjust. That's built into the fabric of what the police do. So if we're actually talking about, if we're not just talking about accountability after the fact, if we're talking about preventing these deaths from the very beginning, it's not about training the police officers not to carry their gun while they're patrolling inside of the public housing. It's about why are they in the public housing buildings in the first place. It's about this perceived threat of blackness. It's about undoing all of that and asking ourselves why we've become so reliant on police in the first place to respond to things that are so minor. I mean, the police are harassing Eric Garner for untaxed cigarettes.
In fact, at that point, it has been argued that he wasn't even selling what they call these loosies.
I don't have
In fact, he had just broken up a fight of others. He had gone in to mediate that, and the police came to that. They did not see him doing that at that point.
He sold cigarettes by the Staten Island Ferry. If you talk to anyone from that part of Staten Island, he's a well-known guy. That wasn't where he was. These cops recognized him. There'd been pressure on that exact thing for a variety of other reasons. And they're just like, oh, this is a skeleton. This is not a person. Is that, at least in some part, because he was black? I don't doubt it for a second, especially in Staten Island.
Well, let's go
The
back.
police are in housing projects because crime there has been up, like real and serious crime. And if you go into any housing project and you talk to people there, they'll talk a lot about bad policing, but they'll also say that they want good police in there. They like the lights to work and they like to be safe.
And this is the thing, though. We foment social decay and then say, police, go fix it. This is the problem here. We are over-reliant on the police, and I understand the sentiment of people living in the housing projects. I mean, I've talked to kids who have watched their friends die and be like, well, the police aren't doing anything, and it feels like they're leaving it up to us to get street justice, right? So that then leads to retaliation, more murder. So it would be nice if the police were solving these homicides in these black communities. But if we're directing so much energy to patrolling, to little things that like loitering, like public drunkenness, so-called quality of life things, then we're directing resources away from those very serious things that people actually have complaints about, and trying to fix real social ills with the police instead of investment in communities.
And Graham, the amazing thing about all this is that this is not a new story. We just had in today's New York Times, Eric Adams, the borough president of the Bronx, a former police captain, tells an amazing story about when he was a teenager and he was picked up by the police and beaten mercilessly by a group of cops in a precinct, and when he was 15 years old, and now he's the borough president of the Bronx.
Right. I was struck in the head when I was about 7 or 8 years old by a cop in the 75th precinct, going to see a show with Danny Kaye, who grew up around the corner from where I lived. The knot is still on my head. I took the job because I didn't want somebody like the cop that hit me to get that position. And we're talking about race, and we talked about it yesterday. When I was applying for the job in 1974, a physician examined me, and as he checked me and palpated, says, I'm sorry, Mr. Weatherspoon, you have a heart murmur. I was a competitive athlete. I could run 10 miles in an hour. If I had had a heart murmur, I'd have been dead long before I could have seen him. So I asked him some medical terms, using medical terminology. And he said, well, how do you know about that? I said, well, I went to school and you went to school. Suddenly, he's like Oral Roberts. Oh, well, forget about it. Don't worry about it. Go get your ears checked. So what they do, they tell black people, they tell black men they have heart murmurs. They will have a cop come in while you're doing your paperwork, aggravate you and agitate you to run your pressure up. Then they'll take your pressure and tell you you have high blood pressure. African-American women will come in. They will tell them they have scoliosis of the spine because black women, we know, have a different structure. Right? Now, all of these things, it's like telling an Asian person there's something wrong with their eyes because they're very narrow. So all of this, there's a paradigm of racism here, even down to stop and frisk, which was to criminalize young black men to prevent them from getting a decent job in the community and in the city wherein they live. And this is what Ray Kelly and Mike Bloomberg did for 12 years in this pattern of racist and selective law enforcement. And we have to look at racism and understand it, because if we don't, we will remain confused, as he was saying.
I want to make clear that Graham Weatherspoon is a retired police officer and retired New York City police detective. It might surprise you as he describes the situation. But I want to go back to another officer, Daniel Pantaleo, and really go into his record. He's actually been sued twice in the past for allegedly engaging in racially motivated misconduct while on the job. As the Staten Island Advance has reported, in 2012, 2 African-American men accused him of subjecting them to an illegal strip search in broad daylight. They said Pantaleo tapped each man's testicles during the search, supposedly to discover any contraband. That suit was settled in January. In another lawsuit, a man accused a group of NYPD officers that included Pantaleo of arresting him despite the fact that he was, quote, committing no crime at the time and was not acting in a suspicious manner. The man said the officers used misleading data in their police report to justify the arrest. His charges were later dismissed. On the streets, Michael, last night, describe your experience of the people who were there, the people who were dying in, the thousands of people who came out, and seems only to be building.
Yes, thousands of people. Like, this emotion, this anger is boiling over, and it's been building since the Ferguson decision announcement. And I think that, you know, there were already going to be people in the streets because the solidarity actions across the country have done nothing but grow and become more targeted and bigger. But to have this come on the heels of that, and for it to be almost more egregious in a way, because you're watching Eric Garner die. Like, we're not even talking about whether or not they could find Daniel Pantaleo guilty of any criminal charges. They couldn't find probable cause by watching the man die and watch Daniel Pantaleo put this chokehold on him. They couldn't find probable cause. So yes, people are just fed up and screaming Black Lives Matter, and it feels futile at this point, but the energy that's growing around this movement feels like it's something that I've never seen before.
And what about the solutions being proposed now by Reverend Al Sharpton and others that we've got to go to the federal level to get these local prosecutions and grand juries investigations of police killings out of the hands of the local district attorneys who have so many ties to the police. Graham, do you think there's any possibility of change with that?
We have called for that for more than a decade, and it goes nowhere. And this is why people definitely need to be voting and electing people that are thinking the same way they're thinking. We can no longer vote for a mayor and not inquire of him, well, who are you planning to bring in as your police commissioner? Who are you planning to bring in as the head of the Board of Education? People need to vote. They need to be represented adequately and truly by people who are there to serve the people. We need to understand police officers theoretically are public servants, but that's not what's happening here. That's not what's happening. We need an independent examiner of these cases who is not related to anybody in New York City in any way. They come in, they pull together all of the facts of the case, and I should not say the facts, the truth regarding the case, because facts and truth are two different things. Because there are police officers who are errant. I have sent police officers to prison during my tenure as a detective. I had no problem doing it. Why? Because they weren't police officers. They were criminals in the uniform. And we need now, we've seen it too many times in the Bronx with D.A. Johnson. I don't have a problem mentioning his name. D.A. Brown, they threw the case on with Sean Bill, failing to cross-examine quote-unquote expert witnesses on ballistics.
Sean Bell, who died, what is it, 15 years ago?
It's 8 years ago. 8 years ago.
8 years
ago. This past Thanksgiving.
And describe what happened to him. It was the morning of his wedding. He was having his bachelor's party. He walks outside, and
there was a team supposedly checking out alleged. They were at this club, Kahlua Club in Jamaica, to find out about drug sales. They found nothing. As a matter of fact, the officer who initiated the shots was trying to solicit one of the dancers for sex as the club was closing. All right, and she was being harassed by the police. She had to leave her home and hide out prior to the grand jury because they were pressuring her and threatening her. And here is the officer. He now, I can't remember his name, but he's the one that initiated the fires, the shots being fired. And, because a hand gesture. But you walk up to a car with gun in hand when you were told not to engage. You're the undercover. The undercover never engages. I worked decoys and ran decoy teams. The decoy never gets involved in the takedown. So you walk up to a car with no identification, of course people are going to move because they see you coming at them with a weapon. Of course Sean Bell is going to try and get away because you're approaching him with a weapon. And then we blame the victim consistently.
We have to break, but we're going to come back to this discussion. This is the day after the second night of massive protests in New York, and these protests are happening all over the country in the aftermath of the grand jury decision in New York around Eric Garner, which occurred in the aftermath of the grand jury decision in Ferguson, Missouri, in the wake of the death of Michael Brown. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. Back in a minute.
The dark brown shades of my skin only add color to my tears. That splash against my hollow bones that rocks my soul. Looking back over my false dreams that I once knew, wondering why my dreams never came true. Is it because I'm black? Somebody tell me, what can I do? Oh, Lord. Oh, something is holding me back. Is it because I'm black? Yeah. In this world of no pity, I was raised in the ghettos of the city. Yeah, oh Lord. Mama, she worked so hard.
Is It Because I'm Black by Syl Johnson. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
Well, more than 100 people packed a church in Cleveland, Ohio on Wednesday for the memorial service of Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old African-American boy shot dead by police last month. Rice, who was in 6th grade, was killed after a 911 caller reported seeing the boy with what turned out to be a pellet gun, which the caller repeatedly said seemed fake. Video shows Cleveland police officer Timothy Lohman fatally shooting Rice immediately after leaving his cruiser from a distance of about 10 feet.
Now reports have emerged that the officer responsible for Tamir Rice's death, Officer Lohman, was deemed unfit for police service 2 years ago when he worked in the suburb of Independence, Ohio. A letter from a superior specifically criticizes Lohman's performance in firearms training, saying, quote, he could not follow simple directions, could not communicate clear thoughts or recollections, and his handgun performance was dismal, the letter said. A day after the funeral, Attorney General Eric Holder announced the Justice Department has found a pattern or practice of unreasonable and unnecessary use of force by the Cleveland Police Department. He stressed that changes are needed to improve community trust in policing.
We have determined that there is reasonable cause to believe that the Cleveland Division of Public Police engages in a pattern and practice of using excessive force, and as a result of systemic deficiencies, including insufficient accountability, inadequate training and equipment, ineffective policies, and inadequate engagement in the community. Now, fortunately, today I can announce that the Department of Justice and the City of Cleveland have come together to set in motion a process that will remedy these issues in a comprehensive and in a court-enforceable manner.
For more now, we go to Ohio, where we're joined by Democratic Ohio State Senator Nina Turner, whose district includes Cleveland. Welcome to Democracy Now!, State Senator Turner. Your family is police. You're a neighbor. Can you talk about your relationship with the Tamir Rice case and how this happened when even the caller to 911 said this kid has a toy gun that he believed was fake within seconds of the police coming up in their cruiser? Seconds, they shot him dead.
Yeah, they did, Amy, and this is beyond what we can put into words, and so certainly our hearts go out to Tamir's family. This is gut-wrenching that something like that would happen, and you're absolutely right. Less than 2 seconds from when the police arrived on the scene, young Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old boy, not a black male, not a young man, a little boy, was shot and killed. He really did not have a chance. This is tragic any way that you cut it, and all of America's heart should cry out for reforms that we need to make sure that our communities are protected and served, and those are not contradictory. We can have both and we got to get back to doing that. You're absolutely right, Amy. I am a native of Cleveland, born and raised there. You know, I have an African-American son. I have an African-American husband. I have an African-American brother, African-American father. You know, every black male in my family has been racially profiled at some point in time. Now, this is big, and I point that out to say, not necessarily in this case in terms of racial profiling, but the larger picture that I heard some of your guests talk about, which is what is it about saying black male that causes a frenzy where people decide they will shoot first and ask questions later. I heard one of your guests talk about humanity, and that is really what we have to get back to. More than being a public servant, as a mother, my heart aches. I can tell you that my husband and I both gave our sons lessons, and I'm glad to hear, you know, Mayor de Blasio courageously talk about what him and his wife had to do for their son. My husband and I did the same thing for our son as well. And the irony of that is that my son is currently a police officer, so I do understand how hard the job is, but we can have both, and we need to have a very deep conversation that moves us to action in this country about how African-American males and Latino males, people of color, are seen in this country. This is bigger than the police department. This is in the DNA of America. This is a centuries-old problem that African-Americans, and particularly African-American males, are seen as more criminal. Nowhere in America should a 12-year-old boy be gunned down in the way that he was. Now, I will say in terms of that 911 call, though, the dispatcher, it appears, in terms of listening to the tape, the dispatcher that took the call from the 911 caller, who did say this may be a toy gun, this is possibly a juvenile, that same message, however, was not given over to the police. Now, that does not justify the tactics that they used, but I want to make that clear that the police officers did not get that message that it may be a juvenile and it may be a toy gun, and that is unfortunate, and we got to do a better job in terms of training and making sure that police have all the information that they need. But let us not forget that Ohio is an open carry state. So again, what the police officers did on that scene that day in terms of young Tamir Rice is totally unacceptable, no matter how you cut it.
And Senator Turner, your reaction to the announcement by Attorney General Holder of the Justice Department's investigation there. What has been the situation with the Cleveland Police Department from your perspective over the past few years?
Well, Juan, I'm glad to hear. I agree with what the Attorney General said. I want to remind that Mayor Jackson did ask for them to come in and do an investigation. You all may recall what happened to Timothy Russell and Melinda Williams. They were shot, 137 shots into their car. They had no weapon, and nor were they charging the police with that car. They were gunned down in that way. That caused a stir, rightfully so. Again, in America, nothing like that should ever happen. The Attorney General hit it just right, that there needs to be a change in the city of Cleveland in the way that police operations are happening. And I'm glad to hear the word partnership, because we have to have the courage to confront and the courage to be confronted. And just because we are talking about these instances, because it burns me when people want to say that just because we're bringing to light the things that need to be changed, that we are somehow anti-police. Nothing can be further from the truth. Most police officers do a great job, and the Department of Justice identified that in their report, but there is a however to that. And in instances where things are not going right, where there may be a culture that is there within some of these departments that are not there to protect and serve, we have a moral obligation to address that. The city of Cleveland, the residents of Cleveland are calling for systemic change, and we need that. And I'm glad to see that our city will be doing just that. And I look forward to lending my support any way that I can, because that is my home. I grew up and I was raised there. I love the city of Cleveland.
And
the citizens of that city love the city of Cleveland. And we deserve.
Just back on the killing of Tamir, in addition to the problems with Officer Lohman, who killed him within 2 seconds of getting out of his car,
yes,
the cop who was driving the car, Frank Garmbach, the officer who was driving the police cruiser when Tamir was killed, also has a troubled history. Cleveland reportedly paid out $100,000 earlier this year to a city resident named Tamala Eaton to settle an excessive force lawsuit brought against Officer Garmbach. The settlement stemmed from a 2010 confrontation in which Eaton said Garmbach, quote, rushed her and placed her in a chokehold, tackled her to the ground, twisted her wrist, and began hitting her body. As we're wrapping up, Juan, as we come back to New York.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Harry in terms of this whole issue. I know the Daily News editorial board has been writing numerous editorials about this the Garner situation. Your sense of the possibility of a federal intervention in terms of changing the grand jury process in police killings?
I'm skeptical. I think it's very hard to do. This comes down to state law. I would note that Governor Andrew Cuomo, who's now mumbling about all sorts of reforms, had the opportunity to appoint a special prosecutor here. And then, in fact, his father, Governor Mario Cuomo, when the Howard Beach thing has happened, used a special prosecutor to deal with that. And he was actually under pressure to have a special prosecutor for racial criminal cases more generally, which he didn't do. But Andrew here is now outraged by where we're at, allowed us to get to this point. What's so important about these demonstrations right now, and how diverse they've been racially, by age. I mean, there's just a lot of different people out. It's a real popular signal to these politicians that there's a demand for a better system. And if these sorts of outrages keep happening, that there will be a real political price to be paid. But I think this sort of change, and it's above the police commissioner's pay grade, has to happen at the local level, and it has to demand real political pressure for just results. And if we keep not having them, people are going to keep being out there, and they're going to be very upset. And this is a huge city, you know. So I keep seeing tourists are like, "Hey, do you know if the protesters are coming and if they're going to eat me?" Like, no, you'll be fine. But this is a very healthy sort of disruption for trying to get something to happen. I don't think we can trust the feds.
And Michael, what you're hearing, not from the politicians, but from the streets, of what people are demanding as this will build.
Well, the conversation needs not to be about trust, whether or not black communities, brown communities can trust police. It's about, what is the police job? What is their job description? What are they out there on the streets doing? If the job is tough, the job is like, give them less to do. Like, decriminalize drugs, decriminalize sex work, like, get rid of the broken windows theory, make them responsible for doing less.
Your T-shirt, Michael, Native Son by Richard Wright?
Yes, indeed. I am a Native son, and I fear for my life in the same ways that, you know, Eric Garner was fighting for his.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there. I thank you all so much for being with us. Michael Denzel Smith is with The Nation. Graham Weatherspoon is a retired detective with the New York Police Department. Harry Siegel is a columnist and editorial writer for the New York Daily News. And Nina Turner, Democratic Ohio State Senator, whose district includes Cleveland. This conversation will continue. We'll also be in Lima next week, throughout the week, covering the UN Climate Summit. There is a lot going on. Our website is democracynow.org. Democracy Now! Is produced by Mike Burke, Renee Felsar, Martin Nurmin Sheikh, Steve Martinez, Semakov, Hani Masood, Ravi Karen. Happy birthday to Dina Guzder and Steve Martinez. I'm Amy Goodman, and with Juan Gonzalez.